for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 19th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 25 years of excellence, Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
Hello and welcome to Week 15 of this meat grinder, commonly referred to as the fantasy football season. The playoffs are now upon 100% of us. I think the vast majority probably get theirs started last week. But I know some commissioners are hardcore masochists. They make their league play a title game in Week 17. You're doing it wrong. The fact that you're here likely means you're still alive. Congratulations and welcome. Andy Hall doing my best to offer advice you can't get anywhere else. Going to break down all the matchups, grading all the fantasy relevant players as I always do. Going to give you a few worthwhile dart throws in the bargain bin. Going to recap week 1 of the playoffs in the 515 Fantasy Football Listener League. All of it over the course of the hour. Invite you to give us a follow on Twitter at 515 Fantasy, the show which you hear Thursdays at 11 a.m. on 1350 a.m. and 102.1 FM ESPN Radio Des Moines, Iowa. Is also available digitally in a number of places, iTunes, Stitcher, ESPNDesMoines.com, to name a few. And in case you missed any part of the show or want to go back and listen at your convenience, those are there for you. Into Week 15 we go, beginning with maybe the least intriguing Thursday night game of the season. And that's saying something, right? Been some real stinkers this year. Not a whole lot to talk about from a fantasy standpoint. Let's begin with the Broncos, who likely stick with Trevor Siemian after a below-average Week 14 versus the Jets, in which he threw for 200 yards and a score. In other words, much better than anybody else they've trotted out there this season. Trevor Siemian is a win even if the team's losing. Here he's a C grade because the Colts are downright awful against the pass. They allow the third most passing yards, a total of 19 passing scores. Almost as bad against the run, though, so Siemian probably won't have to throw much for Denver to have some success offensively here. Demaryius Thomas finally woke up, had himself a day last week, catching 8 passes on 12 targets for 93 yards and a touchdown. He's a solid B grade for me this week. Emmanuel Sanders, almost non-existent against the Jets. I still think he's got flex value, so I'll give him a C+. That's it for the passing game. The running game, again, far too frustrating and to try and decipher this thing. C.J. Anderson emerged as the workhorse last week, and who knows if that continues or if it'll be Devontae Booker. If you need a running back 2 or flex, you could do worse than Anderson in this matchup, assuming he gets the majority of the touches like he did last week. I know it's hard to assume that, but if you can stomach it, only 2 teams, the Bills and the Lions, have allowed more rushing scores than Indy, who allow over 117 yards per game on the ground. A B grade on Anderson this week. Booker, I'm leaving on the bench. On the Indy side, I'm benching the entire passing game with the exception of T.Y. Hilton, who gets a C+ here for his ability to hit on a long one from time to time. The Broncos shut the Jets out last week, but on the season, they've actually allowed the most passing scores in the league. They're tied with the Browns and the Giants at 26. The other guy I'm considering is Jack Doyle, a B+ because of the workload and the fact that Denver give up the second most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. They've given up 8 scores to the position this season, so I like Doyle quite a bit this week. Running game, all on the bench. Denver leads the league, allowing only 3.3 yards per carry. Not a good look for Frank Gore. And Marlon Mack just isn't getting the volume, so I'm steering clear of him. Chicago at Detroit, our Saturday afternoon matchup. We dive into the Saturday games now, starting this week. Begin on the Bears side, rookie quarterback Mitchell Trubisky. Look, he ain't lighting the world on fire with his passing, but he is being efficient, and he is taking care of the ball. Add to that the fact that he can run the ball. He gets a starting grade here. I'm giving him a B-. Lions, bottom 10 in passing yards allowed. They've given up a total of 18 passing scores on the season. Only pass catcher I'm giving a starting grade to, however, tight end Adam Shaheen. I don't like any of the wide receivers in this matchup. Scored last week against the Bengals, did Shaheen, and here faces a Lions defense that's given up 4 more touchdowns to the tight end position than Cincy has. They also allow more receptions per game to the position and more yards. Shaheen is a dart throw C grade. Running game, still the Jordan Howard show. Lions allow only 4.2 yards per carry, but they have given up the second most rushing scores with 17. I think it goes without saying Howard finds the end zone here at least once. He's an A grade. Tariq Cohen getting some play, but I'm leaving him on the bench in this game. Over to the Lions, feeling pretty good about what we saw from Matthew Stafford last week, despite all the concerns about that injured throwing hand. 36 of 44, 381 yards and a touchdown against the Bucs, who also forced 2 INT, it should be pointed out. So maybe the accuracy is a bit of an issue there. But, he threw the ball 44 times total, completed 36. That's not too bad. 381 yards. I guess we could have used more touchdowns maybe if I'm complaining about anything. Chicago remains a relatively tough matchup. They held Andy Dalton in the Bengals passing game to only 141 yards through the air and a touchdown. That went to Brandon LaFell. But Stafford and his Lions, they nearly reached 300 yards with 2 scores just a few short weeks ago in Chicago. I think Stafford's a B+ here, playing at home in a controlled environment. I think he can match what he did in the last head-to-head. Both Marvin Jones and Golden Tate are decent starts. Jones, the bigger scoring threat, a better standard league play. Tate, the PPR guy. I'm calling Jones a B grade, Tate the C+, unless it's full PPR, in which case he's jumping up a full letter grade to B+. Not interested in Eric Ebron, despite the nice showing in Week 14. Bears have been excellent against the position much of 2017. Running game, surprisingly, it was mostly Theo Riddick last week, who finished with 93 combo yards and 2 scores. I think the workload continues here, though you certainly can't count on those 2 scores. But he'll get the majority of the carries, at least that's what it looks like, and he'll catch a handful of passes as well, as he always does. Bears are a neutral matchup for backs, both running and receiving. Nobody else worth a mention after what we saw, or didn't, more appropriately, from Tion Green last week. The other Saturday matchup is a Saturday nighter, the Chargers at the Kansas City Chiefs. First, the Chargers, easy A grade for Phillip Rivers, who's been playing lights-out football of late. Night and day from when the two teams met back in late September, that's for sure. The Chiefs are bottom 5 in terms of passing yards allowed. They've given up 19 scores through the air. Over the past month of games, Rivers is averaging 337 passing yards and 2 scores per game. Arrowhead or not, he's a must start. Keenan Allen, also an A grade. No NFL wide receiver has more red zone targets than Keenan Allen, and the Chiefs have been killed by number 1s over the past several weeks. Number 2s have also had some success, so I like Tyrell Williams quite a bit here. He's a B. Tight end Hunter Henry, a C grade. Chiefs have only allowed 2 tight end scores on the season, but considering how unpredictable the position has been all season as a whole, you got to consider him. Melvin Gordon, still the unquestioned workhorse in terms of the running game. He's an A grade here. Chiefs bottom 5 in rushing yards allowed, 14 touchdowns allowed on the ground this season. I'm not looking at Austin Eckler this week. Pass-catching backs typically do next to nothing against these Chiefs. And for the Chiefs, really tough matchup for Alex Smith and his wide receivers. Even when Smith was among the fantasy's top scoring players, he still was only able to manage 155 passing yards and 2 scores against these Chargers back in September. He also got nothing done on the ground last time these teams met, and that defense has only gotten better. So I'm calling Smith a C grade this week. Tyreek Hill, also a C. He'll see a lot of Casey Hayward in coverage, which is not a plus matchup at all, though it's worth noting he did finish with 77 yards and a score in the last head-to-head. Travis Kelce was completely shut down the last time these teams played. 1 catch, 1 yard. It was one of his only big busts of the year. I don't see that happening again, but I'm only giving Kelce a B grade here. He still has the capability to go off at any time. Kareem Hunt finished with 183 combo yards and a score back in September. Chargers allow a ton of yards per game on the ground, nearly 125 in fact, and are susceptible to dual threat guys like Hunt. I think Andy Reid and that coaching staff learned a lot in last week's win. Feed Hunt, clock control, win the game. I think they try to employ a similar strategy here, so Hunt is an A grade. Houston at Jacksonville. For the Texans, not a lot of great news for that passing game. Elite weapons, yes, but TJ Yates is your likely starting quarterback for Week 15, and facing the Jaguars' vaunted secondary that showed some cracks, actually, in Week 14, but that was against Russell Wilson. TJ Yates is no Wilson. He's on the bench. DeAndre Hopkins, always a start, but here I'm tempering my expectations. Even though he did hit pay dirt in the team's Week 1 matchup, the combination of Yates throwing the ball and Jacksonville's tandem of cover corners, Jalen Ramsey and A.J. Bouye, has to cause some concern in the fantasy semis. Hopkins is a B grade. I feel like that's about all you should expect in this matchup. Equally tough for Will Fuller. He's a C-grade dart throw at best. Steven Anderson was a complete bust last week. The Jags are one of the league's best against opposing tight ends. I'm leaving him on the bench. Lamar Miller got a little nicked up last week against the Niners. Here, he'll see a Jags front seven giving up similar yardage stats over the course of the season, but 4 less rushing scores. Miller is a back-end running back too, based on his expected volume. That makes him a B- for me this week. On the Jacksonville side, it's a Texans defense that can definitely be thrown on, much tougher against the run. That scenario doesn't necessarily pan out early September when these teams met in Houston. But I feel like Bortles will once again be asked to take to the air more often in this plus matchup. Texans allowing 242 passing yards a game. They've given up 24 touchdowns through the air this season. Bortles is a B grade. Call me crazy. Go ahead. I like Marquise Lee a lot this week, giving him a B+. D.D. Westbrook looking every bit as dynamic as advertised in limited action. Plan on talking more about him later in the show. Keelan Cole, yet another speedster with some upside in a plus matchup. He's a C grade. Even Mercedes Lewis in play here against a Texans team that's giving up the 3rd most fantasy points per game to the tight end position. They've allowed nearly 800 receiving yards on the season, 8 touchdowns. Lewis is a B-. As far as Leonard Fournette is concerned, it's totally a volume play. Expect another heavy workload, and with Houston allowing 4 yards per carry, he should be up near 100 total yards if all goes well. Fournette, always a threat to score if Jacksonville gets down deep, too. So he's a B grade. Final matchup of this segment, Baltimore-Cleveland. Ravens fighting for their playoff lives. Cleveland all but guaranteed last week's heart-wrenching loss in OT to Green Bay took the wind right out of their sails. Begin with Baltimore. Joe Flacco, who threw for his standard 217 yards, a touchdown, and an INT the last time these two teams met. Don't expect much more, to be honest here. And if you're probably not thinking about him in the fantasy semis anyway, so just a C grade for Flacco despite the halfway decent matchup. Browns have allowed 26 touchdowns through the air on the season, tied with the Giants for most in the league. Only pass catcher of interest to me in this game is Mike Wallace, giving him a C+. I mean, Chris Moore, Ben Watson, even Jeremy Maclin at this point, who cares, right? Running back situation, clear as mud in Baltimore. I do think Alex Collins is a solid running back 2 this week, despite facing a Browns defense allowing only 3.3 yards per carry on the season. They have been banged up lately. They're missing some characters, so not nearly as scary a matchup as it was earlier this season. And even then, the Ravens' plethora of backs found a way to succeed, giving Collins the B+ here. Buck Allen still a factor some way, somehow. C grade for him. And if you're in a full PPR league, Danny Woodhead, still worth a look in flex. He's a C+, B-, depending on your scoring format. And how about them Browns? Josh Gordon looks like he was cryogenically frozen in 2014. Hasn't lost a step in 3 seasons off the field. Gordon also benefits greatly from the lack of Jimmy Smith in the Ravens secondary. I'm giving Gordon this week a B+. Corey Coleman, a C+, obviously benefits from coverage rolling to Gordon. Deshaun Kaiser, not worth a look deep in your fantasy playoffs. Just doesn't have the accuracy, even to surprise you. Leaving him on the bench. Same with the backs. It's a really tough matchup anyhow, but I don't trust that Crowell, Johnson, or anybody else will help carry you through to your fantasy championship. Just say no this week. That's it for the first set of matchups. Another set coming your way here shortly as we break down Week 15 on the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM and 102.1 FM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're available digitally as well if you'd like to listen at your convenience. iTunes, Stitcher, ESPNDesMoines.com, just a few of those options. We're kind of all over the place. If you just do a simple Google search, you'll find us. We're also on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. Happy to help you there if you have any questions going into the Week 15 games. Back into my breakdown of the matchups. Green Bay at Carolina. First, the Packers, whose dreams of a 2017 postseason have been kept alive by some luck and by some key backups stepping up and helping to win games. This includes quarterback Brett Hundley, who performed brilliantly but now takes a backseat to Aaron Rodgers, who is expected to make his return to the field this week on the road against a Panthers defense that really gets after the quarterback. They're extremely stingy both against the pass and the run. They've allowed the 7th fewest passing yards, roughly 213 per game. They've given up 20 passing scores through 13 games. Understandably, Rodgers will likely be dealing with some rust in his first game action, but he'll need to be cautious and get the ball out of his hands quickly to avoid the pass rush. Therefore, I don't see a whole lot of downfield opportunities, nor do I feel as though Rodgers will want to scramble much on a healing collarbone. My take is this. He's a quarterback 2 option in this matchup, considering the circumstances. I know he's like that toy you just opened up on Christmas Day. You want to play with it, put it in your starting lineup. My take is if you have a better option, roll with the better option. I'm giving him a B- in what should be a tough game. Jordy Nelson gets an immediate boost with his quarterback on the field. Yes, his quarterback, because with Hundley, he did next to nothing. He's a B- in this one. Devontae Adams, a C+, and Randall Cobb is a C grade. Running game, it's all about Jamal Williams. But Carolina are an extremely tough draw for the workhorse back. They rank 3rd in rushing yards allowed. Only 7 touchdowns have been scored on them by opposing backs via the ground. Williams is a B- this week. Over to the Panthers, got to believe after what he was able to accomplish, mostly with his legs in Week 14 against a very tough Vikings defense, that Cam Newton should be a really good start for your fantasy squad here this week. The Packers remain at bottom 10 pass defense, a bottom 3rd unit against the run. They've allowed 22 passing scores on the season, and I think Cam's good for at least 1 on Sunday, but it's the rushing yards he should be able to pile up that'll bolster his stats. Green Bay allows nearly 114 yards per game on the ground. They've yielded 9 scores to opposing runners. I'm giving Newton an A grade this week, and I think it's the right call. Devin Funchess is a B grade. Bunches of Funches. Opposing number ones have been a mixed bag against these Packers in recent weeks. Preseason studs like Tampa's Mike Evans were virtually shut down by them 2 weeks ago, but both Josh Gordon and Corey Coleman of the Browns hit pay dirt last week in Week 14. There's talk that head coach Ron Rivera wants to get Greg Olsen more involved, but he has yet to catch a pass since returning from injury a couple weeks ago. Was only targeted once in last week's win and left the field briefly, limping before coming back out later in the game. I can't trust him. Olsen's on the bench. Jonathan Stewart, one of Week 14's biggest surprises, scoring 3 times against Minnesota's tough defensive front. Here I'm giving him a B-, thinking the Panthers may try to use him in a similar fashion this week. Christian McCaffrey is a C grade in standard leagues, but a B+ in PPR. He ranks 2nd in the league among running backs in receptions, just a few grabs behind the great Le'Veon Bell. Packers have allowed over 80 running back receptions on the season and 4 touchdowns through the air to the position. Miami at Buffalo start with the Dolphins and Jay Cutler, who never liked playing in wintry weather conditions. Not a great matchup from the standpoint of Miami's passing game, which succeeded in Week 14's upset victory over the New England Patriots in Miami. The Bills have allowed a league-low 11 passing scores on the season. Even though they're mid-pack in terms of passing yards allowed, not a good matchup. I'm leaving Cutler on the bench. I am starting Jarvis Landry, regardless of scoring format. Only a blizzard would make me want to put him on the bench. I'm giving him a C+. He's a guy I wouldn't be surprised to see outperform that grade. He's been doing it all year. Not interested in any other Dolphins pass catchers. I do like Kenyon Drake again this week, facing a Bills defense that has allowed the most rushing scores in the league with 18. They also give up on average nearly 124 yards per game on the ground. Since this one should remain competitive throughout, I'm thinking heavy workload for Drake and A grade for him. For the Bills, a really tough matchup for whoever ends up taking snaps on Sunday. I personally don't care if it's Tyrod Taylor, Nathan Peterman, Joe Webb, or tight end Logan Thomas, who actually played quarterback at Virginia Tech. Not thinking about starting any of them. As we saw on Monday, and this was no fluke, Miami's got a really great defense, particularly against the pass. They've given up the 6th fewest passing yards in the league. Now, they have allowed 22 passing scores, so there's some potential there. But again, the situation, it's just a complete mess. The Dolphins' pass rush is awesome. I'd stay away. That goes for all the pass catchers, just not touching them here. LaShawn McCoy, a must start, giving him a B against a Miami defense that is middle of the road against the run, allowing 9 rushing scores on the season. They're among the league's best against pass catching backs, so I don't expect a ton there. But on the ground, LaShawn McCoy can certainly do some damage. Cincinnati at Minnesota. Begin with the Bengals. Big downgrade for everyone in this passing game. Minnesota, a top 5 pass defense. They've held many of the league's best to next to nothing most weeks, and it should be no different here. Andy Dalton is a C grade. Vikings allow only 205 passing yards per game. They've given up the 2nd fewest passing scores with only 13 on the season, tied with Jacksonville. His pass catchers, A.J. Green, a C+ here. No doubt he gets Xavier Rhodes in coverage. Even Brandon LaFell has a difficult task. He'll see a lot of Trey Waynes and Terrence Newman, so he's a C. Minnesota also very good against the tight end position, so Tyler Kroft is on the bench. What about the running game? Well, aside from the obvious anomaly against Carolina last week, where they gave up 3 rushing scores to Jonathan Stewart, the Vikings remain the second stingiest defense in the league against the run, ranked right behind Philadelphia. They allow on average only 3.8 yards per carry. They've given up only 9 rushing scores on the season. Remember, back to last week, that was only 6. Joe Mixon hopes to return after missing last week, and all that does is muddy up the Cincy backfield, which looked revived by Giovanni Bernard, who had all the touches to himself in Week 14. Fact is, this is not a good offensive line, so no matter who it is, I hate the matchup on the road against an angry Vikings front seven, giving both guys C grades at best. Over to the Vikings, still Case Keenum as far as I know. Like Dalton, not an easy matchup from a passing game perspective. Bengals ranked 9th in passing yards allowed, only 213 per game on average. They've given up only 15 passing scores. Now, even though I'm down on Keenum this week, giving him a C+, I do like a few of his pass catchers. Adam Thielen operates out of the slot where he should find some room to run, so I'm giving him a B grade. Stephon Diggs is a C+. Outside guys tend to have trouble against these Bengals. And Kyle Rudolph is a C grade in a neutral matchup, since he has allowed only 3 scores to the tight end position on the season. The backs, I like both in this one. Bengals ranked at the very bottom of the league in terms of rushing yards allowed, about 132 per game on average. They've given up 10 rushing scores, another 3 through the air. I'm giving Jerick McKinnon an A- in PPR, more of a B, B+ in standard. Latavius Murray is an A grade in standard, more of a B, B+ if you're in a PPR league. And point is, I like both. They're both great matchups. They both should get enough touches, and both could reach the end zone this week. Arizona at Washington on the Cardinals side. Blaine Gabbert sees a bottom third pass defense in the Redskins, who have allowed 22 passing scores and on average give up about 229 passing yards per game. I'm giving him a B- because he really doesn't have much of a running game on which to lean, despite a plus matchup in that regard. Larry Fitzgerald, an A grade. Opposing number ones have torched the Redskins over the course of the season, and that includes opportunities against the once feared Josh Norman, who just hasn't looked himself in 2017. Not enough target share to go around for the rest of the Cardinals pass catchers, so I'm stopping there. Kerwin Williams looked halfway decent against a really tough Titans front seven last week. Finished with 73 yards on 20 carries. Not a great per average, but, you know, He still got it done when he needed to, made some big first down runs, and he did catch his lone target for 15 yards. This week, he'll see a Washington front that has allowed the 7th most rushing yards in the league, a total of 11 scores on the ground. Williams, assuming he remains the Cardinals' lead back, is a B- on volume alone. A decent candidate for bargain bin pick, but I think I have somebody better. On the subject of the Skins, Kirk Cousins gets a look at a middle-of-the-road Arizona secondary. They allow 224 passing yards per game. They've given up 20 passing scores on the season. I feel just fine with him as my fantasy starter this week. Nothing special, but it's a B+ for Captain Kirk. Jamison Crowder, Josh Doxson, Vernon Davis, they're all in play here. Crowder, the most exciting of the group, operating out of the slot. He's a B+. Doxson likely gets the Patrick Peterson treatment, so he's a C grade. And since the Cardinals have allowed 6 tight end touchdowns on the season, Vernon Davis also gets a C+. Ryan Grant, far too boomer bust, I should say, to rely on in the fantasy playoffs, my opinion. Samaje Perine, especially with Byron Marshall injured and out for the season, looks to get a healthy workload here. Tough matchup, though. Arizona, 7th in rushing yards allowed, only 3.7 yards per carry, but they have given up 12 rushing touchdowns, which is a key stat here. Reports are he's recovering from a stomach ailment, talking about Samaje Perine, that got him removed from the game last Sunday, so he should be good to go this weekend, giving Perine a B grade with upside. Last matchup of this segment, Philadelphia at the New York Giants. Let's begin with the Eagles and life after Carson Wentz, who went down with an ACL tear in Week 14 and will miss the rest of the season. One of the rare occasions in the NFL where a backup quarterback is literally the next man up, and the team really shouldn't miss a beat. Enter the Nick Foles era, 3.0, electric Boogaloo, right? Looked very sharp finishing the team's Week 14 win over the Rams, and here faces the league's second worst pass defense in terms of yards allowed through the air. The Giants, who have given up a league-high 26 passing scores. Definitely talking about Foles later in the show. Love his pass catchers this week, including Zach Ertz, who should be back on the field. He's an A grade. If not, Trey Burton is a fine replacement. Giants have allowed 10 touchdowns to the tight end position this season. Big fan of Alshon Jeffrey as well. He's an A grade. I like Nelson Aguilar quite a bit too, a B+ out of the slot where the Giants have been killed all year. Even Torrey Smith, I'll throw in as a bonus C grade start. He's getting some target share. Just need to see him get in the end zone. On to the running game where LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, And Corey Clement will be up against the league's second worst run defense in terms of yards allowed on the ground, 130 per game on average. A total of 10 rushing scores have been given up, 3 through the air to the running back position. I think all three guys carry some value to this week to varying degrees. Jay Ajayi, my favorite of the group. I'm giving him the A grade. Blunt, a B plus, because I think he gets some love inside the 5, could stumble into the end zone. And Clement is a C grade dart throw. For the Giants, pretty quick here. Not great news for all the runners, all of whom I'm leaving on the bench here. But the passing game, there is a speck of hope. Eli Manning, a B minus. Philly among the league's most active blitzing defenses, among the league leaders in INT with 16 on the season. They've given up 19 passing scores and are average secondary when it comes to passing yards allowed. Sterling Shepard, a B grade as Manning's primary receiver, and tight end Evan Ingram against an Eagles defense that has surrendered 5 10-end scores on the season is a B grade as well. And Roger Lewis, the dart throw C grade. He saw 11 targets in last week's loss against the Cowboys, so there is some intrigue there. Breaking down more matchups, your next segment, Week 15, the fantasy playoffs. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM and 102.1 FM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm Andy Hall. Appreciate you tuning in as we continue breaking down Week 15 and the fantasy playoffs. Our next matchup here, the New York Jets at the New Orleans Saints. For the Jets, I don't have any good news for you at all. With Josh McCown out for the season with a broken hand, Bryce Petty is the assumed starter against this opportunistic Saints defense in their house while they're jockeying for position in the NFC playoff battle. Good luck with that. I'm benching him. I'm benching the entire receiving core. Hell, I'm benching the tight end and the running backs as well. 0 starters this week for the Jets, who may be shut out for the second consecutive week. That is ugly. You don't want any part of that. On the Saints side, it's a fantasy feast. Drew Brees up against a below-average Jets secondary that has allowed the second most passing scores in the league with 25. Brees a B+ because he won't have to throw a ton. Michael Thomas is an A grade in this matchup. Ted Ginn a C+ long ball threat. Coby Fleener a dart throw C grade. Jets have allowed 8 touchdowns to opposing tight ends. Love Mark Ingram here. Whether Alvin Kamara is 100% or not, Jets a bottom half run defense. They've allowed 9 rushing scores on the season, but let's face it, this team is now officially in full-on tank mode. The effort will be less than 100%. Ingram eats. A grade. Kamara also an A grade if he goes. I think that goes without saying, don't you? The Jets are actually pretty decent against pass-catching backs, but Kamara, as we know, so much more than just that. Our next matchup, the Los Angeles Rams at Seattle. Another really tough matchup for the Rams, who might have the league's most brutal schedule for 2017. A lot of credit goes to Sean McVay and this coaching staff for doing what they've been able to thus far. Rams come into this game 9-4, while the Hawks are 8-5. Neither team, funny enough, guaranteed a playoff spot. Neutral matchup for Jared Goff and the Rams receivers. The Seahawks are notoriously banged up, especially in the secondary, but of course they'll be without the services of at least one member of their D-line as well after the dust-up with some fans last week against the Jags. Goff is a B- for me this week. Hawks allowing only 226 passing yards per game on the season, less than 1 touchdown pass per game on average. Sammy Watkins, I'd consider him a weak flex play here. Cooper Kupp, a PPR guy primarily. Both are C-grade starts. In the case of Kupp, you can bump him to a C+ if you're full PPR. Todd Gurley, a no-brainer, despite Seattle allowing less than 4 yards per carry. They have given up 10 rushing scores. Only 1 through the air to opposing backs. We know Gurley can do both. He's a B+ on volume and some scoring potential. Over to the Seahawks, and no longer will I ever doubt Russell Wilson again, after what he was able to accomplish against the league's stingiest secondary last week. I mean, historically awesome defense Jacksonville has this season, and Wilson took him apart. Expect much of the same this week against a top 12 Rams unit. Metrics just don't matter with some players, you know? Wilson, one of those players. A grade. I've learned my lesson. Bottom line. And I'm starting him in one of my leagues this week with confidence. You should too. Doug Baldwin, an excellent start this week facing a Rams defense that can't seem to stop slot guys for some reason. Baldwin, a B+, only because Jimmy Graham gets a number of looks once the Hawks get down deep in the red zone. It's almost as if Baldwin, if he wants to get into the end zone, has to do it like outside the 15, 20-yard line, and that's what he did last week. Jimmy Graham is an A grade. Rams have allowed 7 tight end touchdowns on the season. Paul Richardson also in play here. He's a C-plus with scoring upside. Backfield, it's Mike Davis and nobody else. Rams, a very positive matchup for running backs. They've given up 12 scores on the ground, allow an average of over 124 rushing yards per game. Davis, consider him a B-minus here because Wilson tends to throw down deep. If Davis is to score, it'll have to be on a long run. Tennessee at San Francisco on the Titans side, a great matchup for Marcus Mariota, but to be honest, I just can't do it. I don't trust him. Haven't trusted him much of 2017. Had high hopes going into the season, but I think it became apparent he wouldn't become the quarterback I thought he would very early on. Niners, bottom third in passing yards allowed. They've allowed 23 passing scores. Now, Mariota may get one, maybe two, but are you willing to risk a donut in the fantasy semis? Me neither. Bench. The pass catchers, I guess. Rishard Matthews, C grade. Same for Delaney Walker. But Corey Davis, I'm just not going to go there. Running game, equally difficult and frustrating. DeMarco Murray should have a solid game here. Niners are allowing only 3.9 yards per carry, but they have given up 10 touchdowns. Volume guys like Murray sometimes tend to perform well against San Fran. Derrick Henry, most certainly a concern, but Murray is the higher upside. I give Murray the B grade. I give Henry only a dart throw C here. For the Niners, it's the Titans, so one would think easier to throw on than run on. That's been the prevailing wisdom here for Tennessee defense. Jimmy Garoppolo should be busy against the Titans secondary that has allowed 22 passing scores in 2017, bottom third in terms of passing yards allowed. Jimmy G, looking solid, gets a solid B grade. Marquise Goodwin, the best of the pass catchers, giving him a B+. Trent Taylor, your dart throw C grade. That's kind of desperate for the fantasy semis, I think. Tight end Brent Selleck seems to have emerged as the scoring threat at that position. Titans kind of a neutral matchup for tight end, so I'll call Selleck a C+. New England and Pittsburgh, the battle for supremacy and the number one seed in the AFC. This is going to be a hell of a ball game. We'll start on the Patriots side. Tom Brady slumping big time by Tom Brady's standards. Bad games against both the Bills and the Dolphins may have already sunk your fantasy squad. If you're still alive, you've had help elsewhere. It's clear. This week, really tough matchup against the secondary that has allowed the fourth fewest passing yards, only 16 touchdowns, 13 INTs collected by this defense, and it's in their house. I'm off the Brady bandwagon for now. I'm giving him a tepid B-. And a lot of that is the return of Gronk. Receivers, hard to know who to trust. Chris Hogan's back, but did virtually nothing in Week 14 against a beatable Miami defense. I do think Brady targets him quite a bit this week. I'll give Hogan a C+ with some hope. Brandon Cooks, very boomer bust. I can't muster more enthusiasm than maybe a B- for him. Danny Amendola, I'm leaving on the bench. He loses target share with Gronk back in the lineup. Steelers are the league's best in terms of fantasy points per game to the tight end position. Missing Ryan Shazier, which hurts, but still solid. Gronk, a matchup nightmare. Still some potential there. I'm giving him a B grade here. Pittsburgh can be run on, but the touches are pretty evenly distributed, mostly to Rex Burkhead and Deion Lewis at this point. Burkhead, the bigger scoring threat, giving him the B grade. Lewis, a C+. Not really interested in anyone else in the New England backfield, although this is like that sort of game where James White will come out of nowhere and score 3 touchdowns, right? Just throwing that out there to the universe. For the Steelers, easy to love Big Ben in the passing game. Patriots, while they have improved greatly against the run, still pretty leaky in the secondary. They've allowed 22 touchdowns through the air, and Ben will be adding to that total this Sunday afternoon, no question about it. Only thing that will cap his ceiling, the presence of Le'Veon Bell, honestly. Ben's a solid B+. Antonio Brown, an A grade, regardless of whether Bill Belichick schemes to take him away. Juju Smith-Schuster returns after suspension, giving him a B grade. If Brown commands more coverage rolling to his side, JSS should benefit. Martavis Bryant, I still don't trust, nor am I starting any Steelers tight ends. The aforementioned Bell, tough matchup. Patriots give up some yards, but they've only allowed a total of 5 rushing scores all year. Now, they have given up 4 through the air to opposing backs. That should be pointed out since Bell leads the league at the position with an amazing 75 receptions through 14 weeks. That's 13 games, 75 receptions. Folks, that's 10.5 touchdowns worth of receptions in full PPR leagues. Le'Veon Bell is the reason I argue against full PPR leagues. But anyway, I digress. He can succeed here. I am giving him a B+. Your final matchup of this segment, Dallas at Oakland. That's the Sunday nighter. For the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, and yet another plus matchup you should feel good about taking advantage of. Understandably, some of you a little queasy about my forecast on Dak last week following a cold streak. Many quote-unquote fantasy experts also got cold feet on Dak, but I believed. And those of you that followed that nugget of sage advice were richly rewarded. Perhaps a big reason you're still here. Congratulations. Anyway, love this matchup for he and his pass catchers. Raiders trending down. They've allowed the 8th most passing yards, a total of 20 touchdowns through the air. They've collected only 2, count them, 2 INT on the season. And those 2 have come just in the past couple of weeks here. Giving Prescott an A grade here. Des Bryant as well. Also made the rare Jason Witten call last week, which paid off. Not so sure here. Raiders have given up 5 tight end touchdowns, but his target share continues to shrink. More likely he stays in to block more often in this matchup, so he's only a C grade. Other pass catchers, it's tough to say. Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams, Bryce Butler, take your pick, I guess. I'm just going to leave them on the bench. I do love Rod Smith for his pass-catching ability, which was on full display in Week 14. He'll also get some carries, and this is a neutral matchup on the ground. We'll talk more about Smith here shortly. Alfred Morris, worth a look as a back-end running back 2 or flex play this week, giving him a B grade because I think he gets some volume. Over to the Raiders, a mostly positive matchup for Derek Carr and company, but like Marcus Mariota in Tennessee, do you trust him with your fantasy fortunes? Here are the numbers. Cowboys allowing 234 passing yards per game on average. They've allowed 24 passing scores. They've collected only 9 INT on the season. I'm giving Carr a B grade here. Dallas has looked better over the past couple weeks against Kirk Cousins and Eli Manning. Michael Crabtree, the easy answer for Raiders pass catchers, giving him a B grade. Amari Cooper, a C+. Jared Cook gets a C grade. Cowboys have allowed 5 tight end touchdowns, but Cook far too inconsistent to rely on unless you have to. Beast mode, on the other hand, has actually been ramping up over the past month, in case you hadn't noticed. Dallas, top 10 in terms of rushing yards allowed. Only 7 running backs have reached the end zone against them via the ground game. A lot of receptions, a lot of receiving yards for opposing backs, though, against this Dallas defense. So if Lynch gets involved in the short passing game, he can help you out here. I'm giving him a B grade based on volume expected. One final matchup to break down. That's the Monday Nighter, and it should be a good one. So we'll get you the grades on all those players here in just a bit. We'll also give you your bargain bin picks for Week 15 in case you need dart throws at the quarterback, running back, and or pass-catching positions. We have a recap of the Listener League's playoff Week 1 as well. And we, of course, forgot at the top of this segment to invite you to follow us on Twitter at 515Fantasy. Happy to help you out with any lineup questions you may have leading into this week's games. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. Final segment of this 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM and 102.1 FM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. I'm Andy Hall. The Monday Nighter is our final matchup of Week 15, Atlanta at Tampa Bay. First, the Falcons. Matchup doesn't get much better than this for Matt Ryan in the passing game. Still fighting for their playoff lives this late in the season. Bucs ranked dead last in yards allowed through the air. A total of 20 touchdowns have been scored on them by opposing pass catchers. Look for Ryan to improve on his 317-yard one-touchdown performance last time these teams met in Atlanta. He's an easy A grade for me this week, as is Julio Jones, who went for 253 and a touchdown a few weeks ago. Mohamed Sanu, a solid B grade, and I don't think there's a need to go any deeper than that. The runners, it was a post-Thanksgiving feast for Tevin Coleman back in November. He ran for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns in the absence of Devontae Freeman. Now that Freeman is back, I expect him to continue the workhorse role, so he's the A grade. Coleman may or may not be able to compete this week. He's in the league's concussion protocol, and anyway, with Freeman back on the field, Coleman's only getting table scraps. Finally, the Bucs. Not an easy matchup for Jameis Winston, who, like Freeman, was absent from the November meeting with an injury. His replacement, Ryan Fitzpatrick, threw for 283 yards but no scores. I think Jameis can get at least one, but maybe not anymore, and I certainly don't expect big yardage numbers out of him. Falcons have allowed the 6th fewest passing yards on the season. Mike Evans gets the Desmond Trufant treatment, which has been very bad for opposing wide receivers. If you've been counting on Evans every week to produce and you're somehow still alive in the fantasy playoffs, I salute you. I see Evans as no better than a C+ here. Deshaun Jackson, very boomer bust, also a C+. And we've been seeing an awful lot of O.J. Howard of late. Can't ignore him, but don't necessarily trust him either in the fantasy playoffs, giving him a C grade. Backfield looks to be a timeshare with Peyton Barber and Doug Martin, who's now healthy and in the mix. Neutral matchup this week. One of them may get in the end zone. Tough call. I'd prefer you steer clear of either of them, but if I had to choose, it'd probably be Martin. He's the one that scored the touchdown in Week 14. The Bargain Bin segment, sponsored by our friends at Twisted Vine Brewing Company, Westtown Parkway in West Des Moines. You can check them out online at twistedvinebrewery.com. Better yet, stop in and enjoy. About 30 beers on tap there, 25 of those brewed on site. It's just an awesome place to hang out anytime, really, but Sundays in particular, where you can watch the Red Zone and eat some pizza, some popcorn, and have some delicious drinks as well. One quarterback, one running back, one pass catcher for Week 15 in case you need a dart throw that I think might actually do something for you. The quarterback this week is Nick Foles, admittedly a chalk play. Foles should step right in and contribute to an offense that seems to be firing on all cylinders. You know, got to love a guy that knows the offense like the back of his hand, having spent several seasons in the Eagles system. A true next man up scenario should play out in Week 15 and beyond as Philly travels to New Jersey to take on the Giants this week, the Oakland Raiders next week, and the Dallas Cowboys in Week 17. Giants have given up the second most passing yards and the most passing scores in the league. Foles stepped right in, made some key throws to help secure the Eagles' Week 14 victory over the Rams. That sort of confidence off the bench bodes well for his future fantasy potential. Your running back this week is Rod Smith, Dallas Cowboys. He has scored in 3 straight weeks, including 2 in the Cowboys' Week 14 win at the Giants, in which he finished with 160 combo yards, most of those through the air. This week, he sees a Raiders defense that ranks mid-pack in terms of rushing yards allowed, but are susceptible to pass-catching backs like Smith. Game script also favors Smith and the Cowboys' backfield this week, so I think there's a lot to like there. Your pass catcher is, I've been waiting for this, D.D. Westbrook, Jacksonville Jaguars. Interesting stats from my friend Scott Fish at Fanball. Speed receivers that run sub-4.4 40s have absolutely annihilated these Houston Texans in 2017. Marquise Goodwin of the Niners went 6 for 106 and a score. Paul Richardson of the Seahawks, 6 for 105 and 2 scores. Tyler Lockett went 6 for 121. Brandon Cooks, 5 for 131 and 2 touchdowns. T.Y. Hilton, 5 for 175 and 2 scores. D.D. Westbrook, the talented rookie out of Oklahoma, ran a 4.34 40 at the NFL Combine and should be a solid dart throw against a Texan secondary that has allowed the 8th most yards to opposing pass catchers and a total of 24 touchdowns on the season. He has taken over as the number 1 wide receiver, even over Marquise Lee, at least it would appear, the last few weeks there in Jacksonville. So D.D. Westbrook, take a very good look this week if you need a pass catcher. The 515 Fantasy Football Listener League presented by Iowa Firecracken, Iowa-owned, Iowa-operated, America-approved. Find them online at firecracken.com. They're on Facebook. You can like them there. They're on Twitter at iFirecracken. Reminder, their Windsor Heights location, I-235, the 8th Street, 73rd Street exit, is now open for business. Fireworks of all shapes, sizes, colors, they're all reasonably priced. They are back on sale now. We hope if you're in the market, you choose to buy local from 3 guys that have been supporting the show all season. We really do appreciate it, guys. Go check out Iowa Firecracken. Sad but true. My season came to an end in Week 14 at the hoofs, not the hands, the hoofs of Moo Cow Guy. Final score 98.40 to 53.46. Bad week to take on the Moo Cow diet. Too much fiber caused my team to take a giant dump down its leg. In the other opening round matchup, it was the 5 seed, the artist formerly known as Comb the Desert, a.k.a. EBDBB&B, and now known as Giant Killer. He changed his name again. He beat Taco Corp, dashing his hopes of a title by a final score of 108.96 to 86.82. Tell you what, semifinal round, it's a good one. Moo Cow Guy and Free Willy in a 2-3 matchup. Giant Killer taking on the 1 seed Purple People Eaters. Winners move on to Week 16 and the championship game. Good luck to one and all. You suck. That's what I got this week. If you missed any part of the show, feel free to go back and listen on demand via iTunes, Stitcher, ESPNDesMoines.com, etc. As always, thank you for listening. Until next time, I'm Andy Hall, and this is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio.